Today we have it, Diablo 3, the big D times 3, the game of shame that many consider lame but is actually one of the most interesting ARPGs ever created. It's interesting because it's fun while being bad. I want to give you context for this game when it first released. Leading up to the launch, this game had too much hype. It was like hype overload. Take a small child, give him a fucking sack of sugar, a suppository of amphetamines, and clone him 2, 3... no, call it 10 times, and even then all that hype wouldn't come close to what Diablo 3 had. It was doomed to fall short, mostly because there was years of people believing Diablo 2 would never receive a sequel, that it was just impossible to continue the series. So much that even the name Diablo 3, or to the Chinese market, Big Pineapple, started to seem like a joke. And then it was announced and the world rejoiced. And then it launched and the world dejoiced. For the past 10 years, all discussion has been about how much posterior it suctioned. And I was right there for a long time. My disappointment about the game was enough for me to say, I hate Diablo 3, it's a bad game, it sucks, Diablo 1 is better, I don't like it, I'll never like it, stop asking. But after I've played through it again and actually delved deep into the systems and the endgame, I think that this game is actually fun, but it's not really an ARPG in any sense of the word, except for the fact that we're using the fucking isometric perspective. It's an illusion! There's nothing about Diablo 3 that is truly RPG-esque. Yeah, you have gear, it has numbers, you deal damage represented by numbers. Numbers, look, it's a real RPG, we got big-ass, literally comically over-the-top, huge numbers. But before I sing the praises and shout the shittiness of Diablo 3, I've tightened the formula on these videos. Section 1, I'm going to talk all about the game, every aspect I find interesting, and then we'll talk about Diablo 3's story and theme in Section 2, and we're ending it with the community and developer support in Section 3. Also, for all intents and purposes, I'm including discussion of the expansion pack in my assessment, emphasis on ass. I'm doing so because launch day Diablo 3 is a far different game, and it's dead and gone, so why bother talking about it? We're discussing D3 in its finished state. I promise I'll swear as much as possible in this video. To begin, you have a choice of 6 classes, 7 if you include the Bible Necromancer class, suck my balls Blizzard. The rundown goes Barbarian, Witch Doctor, Wizard, Monk, Demon Hunter, Crusader, and aforementioned Necromancer. You might think, wow, hey, there's a lot of things to choose here, I bet there's a lot of variety with these classes. Well, you guessed fucking wrong. There is nothing unique about how you're going to try and build a class in Diablo 3. You have 6 hardlocked skill slots, that's it. By default, this game is set to dipshit mode where you can't freely pick abilities. All 6 slots only have a few selections each, and annoyingly, it was so unclear that this was changeable. I literally got a club and chub to level 70 and began the endgame without realizing that you can change this. I want you to just take a few seconds of your time and try to guess what this setting is called. Just picture in your mind what fully mappable abilities would be named. Okay, did you guess it's called elective mode? I elect to play a new game instead of this dog shit. This setting dramatically changes the landscape of play, and it's such a big change that you honestly can't make hundreds of builds without turning it on. I don't even know why this was even an option, because Diablo 3 already has a bad time with giving the player a lot to think about. Until max level, you don't have to plan much of anything, mostly how you're going to plan on staying awake. But besides just having full access to skills, your choices are entirely dictated by either a really good set bonus that you have on gear, namely to the tune of some random ability gaining 30,000% damage increase, or some random legendary that completely changes how an ability works. And you're gonna grab a mobility option, a power me up ability, then some other defense stuff. Every single class goes like this. There's plenty of variety in how you play something, but the template of what you want and need is almost always the same. But to better explain the game itself, let's go over the process from the beginning. Firstly, as a brand new player just installed the game, you have to play the campaign. Step 1, it's unavoidable. Done deal. And sadly, it's really incredibly B&B, or bland and bad, or butt and balls, or bullshit and boring, and etc. But anyway, it's a 5-act plotting mess where you attack things that pose literally, completely, undeniably no threat to you as you level up and up. To emphasize how easy this is, you will quite potentially one-shot many of the enemies and bosses in your way with minimal thought and effort on the hardest difficulty currently available to you. In D3, you can select one of 20 difficulties, yes, underlined, 20 difficulties, each one simply influencing your bonus experience and gold gain and other stuff. Honestly, who cares? The idea is that you push this up as fast as you can. And in order to start increasing the difficulty all the way up to Torment 16, you will have to complete the campaign mode and level a character to 70. This should reasonably take some degree of time or reading comprehension, but it doesn't. All you gotta do is follow the green arrows, click the new abilities, get max level, and actually start playing the game. And then it becomes get out your wallets and let's make them fat as shit because it's currency farming time. And what comes after currency farming time? Literally nothing. Sorry, dickhead, you're doing this until the end of time. I will say, this endgame starts off fun. You have to go a little slowly, find a build that seems good, and go at your own pace, getting new equipment through crafting, gambling, and re-rolling pieces. For a while, I was really into it. I thought it was cool to see numbers explosively go up and up, giving me access to with cool set bonuses, new perks, and since you can freely respec and try new things out, you could experiment. But it doesn't really last long. For me, it was like a light switch moment. In 15 seconds, my brain went from, boy, I can't wait to play some Diablo 3 to, this is the worst game I have ever played. And it's because there's no substance to anything. You aren't looking at damage numbers and feeling proud of anything. Maybe the first time you hit for 1 billion damage, maybe you're engaged when you get a full set for the first time, or maybe find a legendary that you wanted. But when you drop hundreds and thousands of the same legendaries, when nothing has relevance for your build besides the exact same items you've found already, but have a different border denoting it's a rarer version, you start understanding that this game is pointless. To exemplify what they were going for, I want to reference this article from Diablo 3's release from IGN, or Ignoramuses, where they say, quote, "Instead of gameplay like Diablo 2, where I often regretted how I allotted my ability points, Diablo 3 encourages experimentation and finding out exactly what works for your playstyle. It's a vastly superior way to handle character abilities," and praise the overall gameplay, stating that the new systems really do make it a lot easier to enjoy Diablo 3. And this writer put it completely correctly when they claimed that it's a lot easier to enjoy Diablo 3 because that's what it was made for. Ease of enjoyment. You don't work for fucking anything. It's just a constant stream of microscopic dopamine drops. You get more powerful constantly. Things are exploding, gears all over the place, and you have tiny goals to constantly pursue. It's so atrociously bad. And it all stems because there's no depth whatsoever. You have no real choices, no considerations to make. Your build is practically outlined by overwhelmingly powerful set enchantments with only minor details for you to figure out yourself. Rotations are oftentimes a mess of available keybinds where you aren't really thinking about your next move. You have the big DPS button, the panic button, the mobility button, and in general, it's not an ARPG, it's a combat simulator. And in general, it's not an I fucking read the same line twice. I'm great. Think about what skills you want, see what powers you up, read orange-ass text that does ridiculous things, and that's all it is. I will give the game credit for build dynamicism in a way, because there's a lot of different strategies to dealing damage and running around, but the only issue is that there's very obvious pathways you need to be on. Sure, you could be the Fury Barbarian, but not without this belt, or you want to be the Spin to Win Demon Hunter? Well, that's not going down without this set bonus. So the gameplay loop goes like this. Beat the game with any character class, unlocking the entirety of the game for all your characters. Play the highest available difficulty you can clear and farm Nephilim Rifts, randomly generated encounters full of every enemy except the iconic bosses. Whoops, that's a fuck up. Anyway, the Nephilim Rifts drop stuff, and then when you have a good setup of gear, you push the difficulty up more and start farming greater rifts. They also drop stuff, but some different stuff. They work on a scale which gets progressively harder and harder. All the while you gain billions of experience, which gives you Paragon levels, stat choices that should have been implemented from the very beginning, but hey, whatever. Plus all the newly made characters start with the Paragon level points that you've acquired over all of your playtime. So it's just more of ignore the actual game and play this. And yeah, it's this over and over again until the end of time. Who wants to work towards nothing and just farm the same thing thousands of times with no payoff? That's not good endgame. That's a good endgame because it's getting boring as shit. I'm convinced this was made to be a beat 'em up game, and nearly at the end of development they decided to retroactively throw stats into the mix. And yes, there's a point to it all, but long story short, it's badly done. Well, after that glowing review, does anyone expect the next section to be this game's salvation? I'm not even sure that game designers like this game's tone. I know this has been said to death. I know I'm not coming up with a new point here, but this is just like World of Warcraft. It's bright, it has over-the-top spectator characters, everything is a cutscene now, bosses don't feel like you can just fight them, it's all choreographed hoopla, and I don't like it. Diablo should be scary, not some primeval fusion dance dipshit. How cool was it when you went into hell to fight him in his domain where you beat him because you can wield a hammer, and also many other hammers, extremely well? No, now it's all built on the premise of whose fictitious superhero power is better, the Voltron of the Primevals or the strength of the Nephilim. Definitely wasn't made up, totally had badass unstoppable godlike power people group. It's obvious that continuing a story where we left off with a complete victory over Hell's forces was a difficult challenge for the devs. I respect this, I understand this, but they didn't hit the mark, probably due to a long-ass development time and, killing the studio responsible for the previous game. Take this quote from one of the game devs, that unlike the previous games, the players explore outdoors. Again, we're supposed to believe this guy even knew what game he was making a sequel to. Yeah, Diablo 1 is spent indoors all game, but Diablo 2 is mostly outside in the world. When one of the most famous tracks of D2 is called Wilderness, I'm annoyed that the pompousness of the developers are proven wrong by playing the predecessor for 15 fucking seconds. Generally, you have bland visuals that aren't horror-filled, dialogue that better fits an anime, and an environment that you want to just obliterate and get through. Music doesn't stand out, the player characters pull annoying one-liners and cool guy dialogue out all the time. Additionally, I hate the fan service nonsense. A little reference to some Diablo 2 items would have been just fine, a nod to the predecessor, but instead there's so many odd items like Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. Did somebody say complete desecration of tone by the money seeker? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but WoW items being in Diablo is bothersome, not to mention some jokes about popular culture and meme stuff. It just removes me from this grim world and puts me in my real world shit-stained drawers. Final section, hooray! Blizzard says, take your mods and shove them up your ass! Oh, and buy the Necromancer. Yeah, this game offers so little in the modding scene. The developers are clocked out, you get a few balance changes, they update the seasonal gear rewards and like little cosmetic stuff, but for all intents and purposes, no developer supports amounts to much. The community has done their best, they've given a lot in terms of good guides, helpful advice, and without a lot of these resources, I wouldn't have been able to get as far as I did, which was around Greater Rift 100. I felt that I got more out of the community discussions than the actual game gave me, which isn't expressly criticism of the game itself, it just shows that there's a lot of passion for the series out there. And that's about the end of the extra content community, to be honest, so I feel inclined to begin the deliberations about whether this game could be the best ARPG ever made. I'm done! No, it's not. Being completely honest, this game is fun, but it's just not well designed. There's practically nothing here that resembles a role-playing game. I feel no attachment to anything I've achieved here, and that's because there's far too much emphasis on endgame. I know there's been heaps of patches, but even going back and watching launch day stuff, this game has had a similar energy for a long time. Despite rifts and stuff replacing the real money auction house, good idea. Everything has been centralized on endgame farming. That's most ARPGs, but the lack of soul really kills it for me. I'll take easy-ass opinions to have for 500, please. Anyhow, we're now 4 videos deep, and we haven't talked about the wonderful games such as... I actually don't really know what game is next. What a pain in my ass, I have to fucking think. Good day, thanks for coming, bye-bye.